Hey, what's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the LEM number 8.35 horsepower meat grinder. I picked up this unit about 2 weeks ago. I've already put a couple pounds of meat through it just to see how she works, and in absence of any other half-decent reviews on YouTube, I'll give you a quick rundown of the parts that come with it and essentially how it works, and if we got time, maybe we'll run some more meat through and give you an idea on how it performs. Alright, so one of the first few things you'll notice when you take the thing out of the box is that the meat tray has a kind of unique way of attaching to the base, and it clips essentially to the handle that you use to carry the meat grinder. This is kind of a unique idea in that it gives it a little bit more extra stability, and instead of centering the tray and making it more forward loading, they're able to push it more back and allow it to rest on top of the unit itself. Kind of a slick looking design. I like that it loads like that. I mean, it gives it a little bit better profile, and if you notice from end to end, it's actually quite evenly balanced, so when you're going to stuff the chunks of meat down the throat, you got pretty good balance, and I found that it doesn't seem to move around too much. So one of the other things that I noticed right out of the box, aside from the fact that this thing weighs quite a bit, it is a very solid unit. The front plate is, while it's difficult to see on YouTube, it's a very hefty piece of aluminum. This unit is built strong. The finish on it is really nice. I mean, it's obviously so polished you can see everything reflecting in our shop here. The heat sinks at the bottom and the vents, they're not vanity vents, they're fairly thick cut, and seem to do a pretty good job of letting the fan suck in air and keeping this unit cool. One of the more substantial pieces that comes with this unit is the throat, and forgive me if I'm using the wrong terms here, but this is essentially what I call the throat, and where we load our meat through. It's a pretty hefty unit. It weighs quite a bit, and frankly I was quite surprised at how heavy it was. Now, what makes this particular unit somewhat more unique than the previous units is what they call their big bite technology. Based on what I read, the big bite technology is essentially a method to take on bigger chunks of meat in this particular section here as it's going through the throat, which allows it to get a good bite on chunks that are dropping in there instead of just pushing them back up through the throat itself. In practice, I found it does work pretty good. For a number 8, it actually pulls down meat pretty quick. I mean, I think it would probably compare to some of the other models, probably in a 12 or even a 22 number category. So this technology seems to work. They say it improves the speed, I think, about by a third. I haven't timed it, but so far so good. The other pieces that come with it, I mean, pretty much standard fare here. You get your coarse plate and your fine plate. Both of these obviously number 8s. Your ring to lock it down, which itself is a fairly solid ring. Your blade. With this particular unit, you get one blade. Given the suggestions I've seen on YouTube, a lot of folks recommending having one blade for each grinding plate so that they ostensibly mesh together, grind together, and form kind of a better one-to-one relationship, as opposed to switching back and forth from your different plates. So what's nice about the number 8 in particular, I found, is that the aftermarket pieces or the additional blades are quite cheap. Obviously, the bigger you go, the additional pieces are going to cost you a little bit more money because there's a little bit more steel involved. What's particularly nice about LEM's additional pieces is you can get inox or stainless steel pieces. So in this particular case, I've matched up the stainless steel one with the finer grind plate, and the standard steel with the coarse grinding plate. The other piece that comes with it is this filler tube piece, which essentially goes in front of your locking ring so that you can attach your tubes for stuffing sausages. The other couple pieces that come with it, you got your basic cheap plastic hollow stuffing tube, nothing fancy there. You'll also see in the package 2 of these things, these nylon hard washers, basically meant to keep metal from contacting metal as you put that piece into the actual tube. Right, so coming around to the back of the unit, one thing, or actually 2 things that I wanted to point out. First is the plug relief. I mean, it's a very solid plug relief for a unit this size. Usually they put those on high-end units. Cheaper units will have small plastic retainers for the plug, but all the LEM products seem to be well built in that they have this very solid relief that prevents essentially the plug from being ripped out or broken off. The other thing that seems to be common on all the LEM products, at least in the prosumer range, are the pop-out breakers. So if you happen to snag something, piece of bone, strong piece of fat or cartilage, ostensibly that should pop out and protect the unit from basically damage. The venting, again, very nice cuts. The unit has a beautiful finish to it, as you can see from the reflection. Apologize for the reflection of all the stuff in the background, but it just goes to show how well built the product is and how clean it looks. Coming back around to the side of the unit, one thing I didn't point out before was the locking piece here. I'm not going to pull the tube out, but just behind that locking bolt there, or whatever you want to call it, thumb screw, is a little dimple in the auger tube, which basically keeps the unit from rotating back and forth. Small detail, but I mean, if that's the difference between that tube turning back and forth, that's something they thought of and is quite practical. LEM's given a little bit of forethought to how the use of this device is going to go, and perhaps you're going to have messy fingers, grease all over your hands. They're kind enough to put basically a plastic cover in there to keep the switch from getting all gummed up. Alright, the only other thing I wanted to point out was a lot of folks out there are probably doing what I did and comparing specs from one unit to the other. And in particular, comparing specs from, say, the LEM products to the Cabela's line. Now, one thing I noticed in reviewing the Cabela's meat grinders were that, and you can test me on this, a lot of their specs seem to be on the high end, whereas the actual production values were on the low end. And what I mean by that is the closest device to this is Cabela's number 8 3/4 horsepower unit, which is rated at 6 pounds per minute or 360 pounds per hour. Now, LEM conservatively rates their product at 4 pounds per hour. Now, while I couldn't find a lot of examples of the number 8s, comparing the 1 horsepower units from LEM to Cabela's yielded an interesting observation. And you can test me on this, but go look at all the videos you can find on YouTube for the Cabela's units and watch the grinding time. It's pretty straightforward. Count the clock on the bottom, see how much meat they put through it, and time it. If you're like me, you'll notice that the specs that Cabela's puts out seem to be a lot higher than what people are actually achieving in practice. Now, I'm not going to fault Cabela's for putting out a high number. These things may be capable of putting through that much meat. What kind of meat? I don't know. All I know is running the meat through the LEM, if they say it's 4, it's 4. You may get a little bit better, but I have yet to find one that puts out any less. So don't necessarily put all your money on the numbers. Take a unit out for a test drive. LEM, from what I've experienced, has some of the best customer service out there. I'll put in a couple of my notes some of the things that I brought to their attention and what their responses were. They're fantastic people to deal with. In my particular case, based on the amount of meat I'm producing, I'm not going to lie to you. I want to go to a bigger unit. I love this unit so much. I like the way it's built. I like the accessories that come with it. I like the fact that I can find all the parts at more than one store, i.e., I don't have to go to Cabela's to find my parts. I can find the LEM parts pretty much at any meat processing store or any half-decent restaurant supply store, which is pretty good. So that gives you some options in terms of price and adapters and pieces that go on it. Something to consider. Right, so here's the basic components that you're going to end up using to grind. So of course you've got your auger itself, your grinding plate, whether it's coarse or fine, medium, whatever you're going to start with or finish with. Your blade, like I mentioned before, I tried to pair up my blade with a grinding plate so that they generally wear together, as opposed to using the same blade across different grinding plates. And finally you have your locking or retaining ring. Once you've got the auger itself in place, you want to make sure that you have that blade on and facing the right direction. I mean, it seems simple enough, but I'm sure there's cases where if you're not familiar with how it works, you may intentionally put it the other way, thinking it's meant to cut the meat that way. This is actually meant to meet up cleanly with the grinding plate, so that piece there, the flat piece, should be facing towards the grinding plate, which we'll put on now. you notice on this grinding plate right now, it's already got wear marks, and what that's telling me is that this plate should be facing the blade. If you look at the other side of it, it's still got the factory original finish on it, so it's pretty obvious which side goes to which. I mean, I've chosen one side arbitrarily. I didn't have any rhyme or reason for how I did it, but we'll put it back in place the way it's grinding right now. And as I mentioned before, you'll notice that there is a little notch on the very bottom that makes it easy to determine which way it's supposed to be in place, and how it sits in place and how it locks. Finally, put on your locking ring. As I mentioned before, I don't know, or I didn't know how tight it was supposed to be. They recommend hand tight, so in this particular case, it's snug right now. There's not very much movement there. We'll give it a little bit more of a turn, maybe eighth of or tenth of a turn, just to snug it up, and I think we should be in business. So we'll get some meat into the thing. We'll get it prepared to grind some stuff up. Alright, so we've got about 3.5 pounds of pork. That's about all I had left on a Boston butt that I just carved up. I wish I had a little bit more to show you how long this thing can go, and what type of volume it can put through, but you should get a pretty good idea here of how much meat we have and how quickly it'll process it using this new Big Bite auger. There you go. It's a good sign. Very long, stringy meat, and it's a good sign that it's processing at a good speed and it's able to keep up. So hopefully this gives you guys a pretty good idea what the fine head can do and consistency it does and how fast it'll go.